try and run the PowerPoint just to see if that works.
This right here.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Is that the right thing?
No, that is not mine at all.
What am I looking at?
No, mine's yes.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We are running a little bit late, so we'll try and make up some time along the way. Hi, I'm Paulette Epstein. I'm going to be the moderator of this session. So just a quick reminder for sort of what goes on. Each talk is 10 minutes long with 2 minutes for questions, or they can also just keep talking if they decide that as well. So I will give a warning to Mary here, and then she should be able to. Then she can decide and see if she wants to keep talking or ask questions. So let's introduce Mary Holt from the Morrison Planetarium, and today she will be talking to us about planetarium content, dome optional.
Yes. Hi, everybody. How's everyone doing today? Fantastic. I hope everyone enjoyed the talk just now as much as I did. So I'm just going to be giving a quick rundown of presentations that we do at our planetarium that are not in the dome specifically, so other places, other venues that we have throughout our museum. And I'll just give like a quick overview of all of them, and hopefully you guys have questions about them. We can chat about maybe what you guys do outside of your domes, if you do presentations in other spaces at all. And kind of the main things I was thinking about when talking about these presentations is, well, why is it at all important to do presentations outside of the dome at all? And one of the things about a lot of these spaces that I'll be talking about is that it allows for a lot more interactivity than we're able to have sometimes in the dome, because like in our planetarium, if you're presenting in there, you're behind the audience, they can't see you, you can't really interact with them super easily. So having these other opportunities and other spaces where you can present in different ways is really helpful. And interactivity is very helpful as well. For one thing, we've done surveys with our guests, and it's shown that they are 5 times more likely to rate their experience at the museum at a 9 or a 10 if they interact with someone that works there. So it's a very important thing. And also makes our days better to have variety. So one of the places that we give shows is Hofeld Hall, which also acts as like a pre-show staging area before people go into the Morrison Planetarium. So it's a place where they can start to get dark adapted and learn the rules for the planetarium, things like that. But after a couple of years, after we reopened back in 2008, we also started to use this as a presentation space. And it's kind of like a planetarium on a wall. So like we use UniView in there and are able to give like 15-minute to 20-minute long shows in there as well. And we're able to interact with the audience a lot more. It's a much more casual space than the main planetarium dome. People are encouraged to like sit on the floor, and we've been trying to do a lot of like questions and back and forth during these shows, and starting to do a lot more interactive things as well. And there's a couple of different ways that we give shows in here. So we have this main big monitor here that we control with UniView with a custom interface that we have. And we also have an iPad that we can use as well. And there's me with the Galaxy. We have a new show that started a few months ago called Giants of Space. So we are also able to, in this space, make shows that relate to other exhibits that we have throughout the museum, because it takes less time to make shows in here than it does for like the pre-rendered shows that we have in the dome. Those can take 2+ years for our visualization studio to put together, whereas in here we can make show in like a few months or something, so we can rotate it a lot more frequently. And one of the big things that I've been very excited about recently in this space is shows specifically for our youngest learners that we have coming to the museum. So since it is a more casual, more interactive space and people are welcome to leave, come and go as they please, we're able to do shows that are for kids under the age of 5. And I just was the head of this new show called Moon Explorers, where we pretend to go to the moon and we pretend to walk around like astronauts, and I have the kids point out things that they see and things like that. So we have moon phases and pretend to go to the moon and everything, and it's a really fun show. And in the future for Hofeld, one of the things we're hoping to do is make it even more interactive, so incorporate some like hands-on activities during a presentation, so it's not just like a lecture essentially, and have more of a show that's based on what the audience knows already and what they want to see and what questions they have. And some other places that we do presentations outside of the dome are we do have hands-on tabling activities that we do during our nightlife event, which is once a week, and which is adult only. But we also have special events like sleepovers and things like astronomy day and things like that, where we do these hands-on activities. And we have started to use that in another space that we have here at Science Today, where we're able to use UniView over there as well and use it planetarium software and use both the hands-on activities and the planetarium software together. So we've used some of the NICE networks activities with this as well. So one of the ones that Christian over here has is the Imagining Life activity, where people get these different cards with extremophiles on them and where those extremophiles live here on Earth. And then we would use UniView to fly to different locations that could have similar conditions to where those extreme animals live here on Earth. And we also have things like scale models of solar system objects, and we use that in pairing with UniView. And then the last place that we have done presentations outside the dome is our 3D theater. So pretty similar to the dome in the fact that the shows are pretty similar to some of the live shows that we have in the planetarium, but with a special twist of it being a 3D experience. And also in the 3D theater, unlike in the dome, which we only allow kids ages 4 and up, in here was all ages as well. So the common goal of all these places is to have more interactiveness, and the point of me bringing this here is to share with you all how we do things, and I'm curious about what you guys do, or if you have any questions about anything that I just shared. So we can switch to Q&A if you want. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Mary. You just mentioned your age limitations. Can you repeat that quickly? It was.
Yeah. So in the planetarium dome, we only allow ages 4 and up.
And does that work?
Most of the time.
Okay. We gave up because
we especially with members, you often get people coming in. It's like, this is my kid's 4, and it's like, they're not able to walk up the stairs on their own. So yeah, most of the time it works.
Any other questions?
Hi, you said that you had a nightlife event. What all do you do for that?
So for nightlife, it's once a week. It's on Thursday nights from 6 to 10. And it's a different theme every week as well. So there's a whole team, a couple of people that decide what the theme is going to be. And then we do 3 shows usually in the planetarium for nightlife. And then along with the 3 shows that we have in the planetarium, we also have either telescopes up on the roof, or if it's foggy, which it's San Francisco, so most of the time it's foggy, we do those tabling activities. So we've started to do the Science Today activities during that as well, which has been a big hit. Which with Science Today, the stuff we've been doing with UniView at that space, we're trying to compile a list of questions that people tend to ask and just be like, what do you want to see? Make a profile that's based on what people commonly ask about.
How long does it take you to do a show?
In any of these, so Hofeld Hall is usually somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. We definitely try not to go over 20 minutes because then that usually goes into time when we need to be loading people into the planetarium shows and stuff in the dome. At Science Today, that's a much more open-ended. People hanging out for an hour or more, and we're just like flying around the universe with UniView and answering questions and stuff. And then in the 3D theater, that was usually like and these are all live presentations as well.
All right, awesome. Let's give Mary a round of applause. Thank you. And let's also thank her for catching us up. So thank you. All right. So we're going to take just a couple of minutes to sort of change over. Again, just a reminder, the length of each talk is about 10 minutes, and then there are 2 minutes for questions or any more additional information that the speaker does want to give us.
Let's see, 1, 2, that's a good test. Okay, good. Should I begin then?
We're going to wait a couple minutes. Huh?
We're in introduction time, so we probably want to stick to the plan.
Right, yep. So I'll give you a 5-minute warning. Although I think you actually have the time right there, which is really cool.
That is when I start.
Yeah. So we're just waiting a couple of minutes so that so both sort of pop back and forth between the two rooms. All right, we can probably give her a couple extra seconds. So I'm going to introduce Jean Crichton. She's going to be talking to us about finding and encouraging Indigenous voices.
I'll start. Thank you for being here. My role today is to talk to you about an experience planning a program with staff and students at UWM, Indigenous, Native American, I should say, people. We had a program called Indigenous Voices Sharing the Wisconsin Sky last spring, and I'd like you to learn something from what I learned. Many of you know I grew up in Greece, so I truly knew nothing about this. And I had been intrigued ever since I started to have a program that would highlight the Native American people of Wisconsin and learn about their star stories and the connections they have with the sky and the earth. So I told everybody I knew. I did not ask how I move forward. Let's find out. Good. I asked everybody I knew about this, and I happened upon Margaret Newton, who happily for me is the director of the EQI, so that's the American Indian Education on campus, and she's also interested in astronomy, so that was fortuitous for me. This takes time. It takes time to build trust. It takes time to figure out a way to talk to each other. And despite the fact that she was interested in astronomy, she had no vision about what we could do together. So I told her what I would like to do is have once a week a program for every nation of Wisconsin, a live program where the people themselves were talking about their own culture, and I would just be there and make stars happen. That was my hope. Sometimes this can take, as I said, time. Visit a powwow. Make sure that you show you're serious about your intent, because that won't be taken for granted. I thought starting small would make sense, so we started with a pilot. We invited students who were Native American and were joining UWM to a 2-week workshop, and one of the activities they did was to come to the planetarium and spend time talking about Northern Lights, which is beautiful and interesting. We talked about the scientific and also the cultural connection with Northern Lights. That was such a success that we decided we can work together. And I felt free, considering our conversation this morning, about asking questions. for example, what to call people. Native American, Indian, First Nations, all of these terms are used in North America, and I found that the best thing to do is to ask. People will tell you how they would like to be referred to. Hint, mostly they want to be called by their nation. So if they're Ojibwe, that's what they want to be called. I had to double check facts. You can ask me about that later. I assume I'm going to have less time than I imagine. Be prepared for changes. I told you what my hope was, but the fact of the matter was we could not find star stories. We could not make a full program per nation. For some nations, we just have a whole lot less than we do for others. So we had to kind of regroup and reimagine what the program was going to be. One of the things I didn't expect was that some of the students, the Native American students who were involved, were heartbroken because they realized that so much of their culture was gone. We could not find the word in Stockbridge, Munsee, Mohican. We could not find the word for sky. Hopefully that can change over time, but it made it important. One of the faculty members, one of the Native American faculty members to step in and give people that idea that, well, we're talking about revitalizing. The first step of learning more about your culture is to realize you better look for it because it's slipping out of your fingers. I had to definitely depend on liaisons, my people, my staff, my campus people to reach out to the community. Even they had to call in favors to get speakers to come. I could not just pick up the phone and say, would you like to come? Even with the stipend on the table, people wouldn't. And the reason for this isn't necessarily what you might expect. People didn't feel that they knew enough. I don't know enough about stars. How could I speak on my people's behalf about this thing that I don't know very much about? So we had to, in some cases, invite them to see another show so they get a sense that we mean well and what they can bring is important to the table. Use what you can. Language turned out to be something really important and that we highlighted. We found that showing people the different words in different languages made them clear that this is not some uniform group of people. Even the languages that they speak come from different linguistic families. They are completely different. Some of them have similarities because they grew closer together, but others truly are different. I mentioned this before, so I'm correcting a mistake I made yesterday. Ningabian, try it please. Ningabian is the Ojibwe word for west. Most Native American languages don't use nouns as a thing. It's always something that is doing. So Ningabian means melting and how the day melts into night. It also is where souls are supposed to be going. So it has a double meaning. When we got into production and we were thinking about how the show was received, we had, of course, public audiences who were very hesitant to ask questions because they didn't want to offend. So we had to have a moderator, so campus moderator, a student or staff who could be the liaison between the audience, who was not always Caucasian. We had 15 actually several occasions we had students coming from the reservations, from high schools to the planetarium, and they got to see one of their own people in a public place being the authority voice, which to me was worth a lot, and I think to them as well. Because we knew that in our community this was of interest. We found, though, that we had to steer the conversation. Often people of the media would come with a perceived notion, this is a conflict between science and Native American stories. And we try to push that narrative because, push back on it, because one of the things I found so interesting was that the language often hid the understanding, the scientific understanding. For example, the moon is understood of being a thing that's reflecting light, not making its own light. And that was different than stars. So we were trying to highlight the science wherever possible. What worked, everybody won in this, including the planetarium, the Native American organizations on campus, off campus, and the audiences who learned. One of the unexpected things I found was that a lot of people who came had some piece of Native American background that they were now willing to, they could connect to because they learned something about it, and they were also learning about that they didn't know anything about either. Students did some of the research to find information, and we thought that we thought that this might be a great way to encourage them, to give them money, to pay them stipends for their research. And it turns out that wasn't as attractive as we thought. A credit would have been better. So next time we do this, we're going to have it as part of a course, and it'll be parts of assignments, and that appears. We're working on other projects, including making Northern Lights, Aurora, I should say, connections between Ojibwe people specifically and Inuit people in the subarctic of Canada. There is more information in what appears in the December issue of the Planetarian if you would like to hear more. But of course, you can also email me. I'm happy to take questions if you have any. Thank you. Yes.
So when you approached your faculty member who was part of the community, did you have an idea of what the show would be, or did you say, I would like to do a show, so you came to them with an idea to drive the course what the show would become, or did you come to them with an idea to help fill in the gaps? Because I've heard things either which way of kind of us telling their story, them taking the initiative to tell, them as in any other culture that you don't belong to, who's actually driving the story.
I felt it was important that they were co-producers, that they were as involved. And I think that when you are approaching underrepresented people, they're so sick and tired of being the last minute add-on that they really had no power in deciding what this program is going to be. So I had a very general frame. I think we should have a live program, 2 programs a week, every week, a different nation for 7 weeks. But that's a pretty general framework, and people could, we had to move things as needed. One of the things I want to say was that the importance of having an open dialogue. One of the topics we wanted was to talk about origin stories. And one of the students actually recorded a 5-minute origin story, which was already very short. And the hope was that we would include these for every program. The fact of the matter was that the person had a tremendous 5 minutes in a dark room, and I thought, this is just a nightmare. 5 minutes is a very long time to hear even something as important as an origin story. So I took it upon myself to just say, let's try and shut this down to 40 seconds. And I didn't, of course, do this in public. We did it, and I said, I think could we live with this? And because we had built some trust with each other, Margaret said, absolutely not. This is a very important piece. It has a very specific way, reverent way of talking about it. And I said, okay, well, we actually, then we can't do it. And that was the decision that we made together. But I needed her input, and she needed mine, that this is not going to work in a dark room. So those are the things that, so it's important that they're driving the train with you. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question. Any other questions?
Is your show so specific to Wisconsin that it can't be exported to other states, or?
It's specific to the 6 nations of Wisconsin. So, so that would be Ho-Chunk, Ojibwe. Was going to happen, so I decided not to embarrass myself. Hold on. Alphabetically: Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Ojibwe, Oneida, Potawatomi, Stockbridge, Munsee / Mohican. And the answer is we are working with a children's museum to make it something that they can use standalone, because they don't want to have to depend on guest speakers. So it can be modified. If so, this is something of interest to you, you tell me, please. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you.
She's getting ready and prepping. Just a reminder for everybody, the talks are 10 minutes, and then there are 2 minutes for questions or the speaker to continue talking, depending on their preference. I also want to mention, if you do have questions, please wait for the microphone because we are recording and streaming this out as well.
Or on my, like this. If I can, like that. Okay.
All right, so we have Jeannie Bishop, who's talking about quality control for astronomy activities and planetarium programs.
Thank you, Paulette. Can you hear me all right? I put on this lavalier. I hope that works. Thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be sharing something with you this morning that I've thought about for a long, long time. I want to say that I don't want to sound presumptuous, but I've had some experience in giving programs, planning programs, watching programs, hearing about programs for a number of years. And so you may not agree, but I hope that you can carry away something from this that will impact your thinking on quality control in activities and programs. So let me click this. My perspective, as I've said, comes from these things, okay? And there's a lot of things that we can listen to and we can look at through our experiences, and these are mine. Okay, each of us brings a unique background and a set of expectations. Boy, was this brought home this morning, right, with our 2-hour opening program, the bias that we might have. And when we make judgments, whether they're quick judgments or even considered judgments, how we really need to use that left brain processing rather than just snap judgment. When we study materials or view a program, we are different in the way we look at things. At IPS 2018 in Toulouse, we had a button rating system, and I found that the judgments were all over the place for the same full dome show that was presented. This was a set of several days before the main conference. Okay, now these are the things that I think that are factors that we can and should consider in our activities and our programs. First, that all individuals and groups are shown respect. Very, very important. Second, that we have accuracy, both scientific and other kinds. Third, that our explanations and concepts are not too complicated for the group that we have. We have to know our group. That the show or the activity is not out of date. that has clean and nonviolent humor, and it promotes a positive attitude, encourages the critical thinking, and appeals to different senses and different learning styles. Now, of course, I'm assuming that this is not a laser show. You know, this is the kind of program that is going to be mostly for education, but maybe entertainment too. Interact with quality. They aren't the quality themselves, but they're very important to consider. And overall, we've got to know our goals. I mean, that goes maybe without saying. We know our goals. The level at which the group is operating. We may have a second grade group, but they're from a special disabilities school, so they're under normal age cognitive level. We have to consider our STEM standards that are impacting the groups that we see, whether local or state or national. The technical capabilities and the materials that are lots of kinds of effects available. Others, no, slides and limited kinds of things that we can do. And the same is true with activities. Activity size area, possible disabilities and special characteristics of the participants. Did you note on television recently the albino group? That was a singing group that came back to promote awareness of albinoism and how albino people are mostly like everybody else, but don't judge us on the cultural expectations, including languages. Jean just spoke to this. I loved your talk, Jean. Considered when we're seeing a group that is maybe a special group in a help available, and the skills of the presenters. Maybe you have people helping you don't know anything about astronomy or anything about how kids are. They know all kinds of astronomy, but they don't realize what this. Okay, we respect gender, race, religion, disabilities, unusual human physical features, and groups who may hold different ideas, like existence of dinosaurs and humans. Have you seen the Creation Museum? Anybody? Oh, gosh. Aliens invading Earth. About these things, and whether within a program or even in an activity or after, you show that. You show that bias. And that bias. We reject non-science. But if we keep our tone mellow and bland, and they're going to remain open in their thinking to what you have to say. Accuracy. How about this? Yes, some expensive full dome shows. I saw them at the full dome shows in Brno a couple years ago. I saw them in Toulouse. Reverse websites have activities that have inaccuracy. Yes, many Harvard graduates have not known reasons for basic astronomical phenomena. Remember Phil Sadler's private we have for shows that are recorded. So we should check and recheck words and visuals before we use them. Record. All that has to get some kind of look over before. Here. Nope. Yeah. All right, adapting words and concepts adapted are to are not going to be understood by young children. You say concurrent or they don't really understand that. The analogies, analogies is a really important thing. students can do. They can take a fact pretty easily and compare it with another fact. I think every second one, and you'll get to 1,000,000 in 12 days. And if you try that with 1,000,000,000, it'll take you 31. I attended the Kavli Institutes, and we were trying to come up with things that would be good for and they make a big thing of this balloon analogy. The balloon, blowing up the balloon to represent the Big Bang expansion of the universe. And thank you. And so what happens is that it's good because you get an expanding universe. What's good is you have galaxies going farther apart, but what's bad is dimension off, okay? And the ugly is that it's expanding out into air when you blow up the balloon. And that's not what happens with the universe. You create that space as the expansion occurs. That's the ugly. And awareness of topics that are interesting. By the way, children seem to be less able to sit for a while and concentrate on the same thing for a while, a narrowing of attention span. Have you noticed that? How many of you have noticed that narrowing of attention span? Okay, I don't have a lot of time, but I'm just going to say that for kindergarten and for third grade and for fifth grade, and could do with phases of the moon, for an example. You can teach each thing, teach each group Many kindergarten children think gravity pulls from top down, not toward the center of the earth. Young children do not understand differences of solid, liquid, and gas. Many students in early elementary grades do not understand where sun, moon, stars are in space and even in the solar system. Many students think people have visited all the planets, and many middle school students and older believed intelligent life has come to the earth. When you say what's wrong with it, I think that's a really important thing. If you have something that's off scale, make sure you note that. Confusion comes up in planetarium. Wrong? Okay. Too many simultaneous visuals, material presented too quickly, and then activities and inadequacies that come up. We can take artistic license. You know, Jean was promoting science in her programs, but when you have something that is a story, yes, you can have things that are not right, with air around each planet to breathe and so on as characters go off. And if it's understood as a story, that's okay. Humor, wrong. If people laugh with you and not at you, should be clean, should be nonviolent, a wonderful tool for involvement. Silly analogies, puns, unusual accents, music, good sources. And watch that your programs are not dated. That's very important. Scientific thinking now has an idea been updated. Add something live to a recorded program. Okay. Status of space missions. Has those missions you talked about in that program been accomplished or not? Does the presentation stimulate critical or reflective thinking? Activity always in an activity in an activity we always have interactive stuff, but in programs we may not. Mary Holtz shared this morning how she does things with interactive programs at their facility. How wonderful. And channel reflective feeling. And Dana Thompson, I don't have time to talk about all the things she did, but this Think, Pair, Share we did this morning, that's one of her things. And she interacts with questions. Wonderful, absolutely wonderful. My last quality factor is that we have content and procedures that will appeal to different styles of learning. And there are many styles. So try to incorporate written and oral and body motion and many senses as possible, such as a scent in the planetarium. I used to think that was kind of funny, but I don't anymore. Pine for holiday. So these are things we can do. I welcome your ideas. Most importantly, as we do things to make quality programs, we're helping people have quality learning experiences. And I'm sorry I went over time. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Jeannie. So we don't have time for questions. We're gonna.
I don't think there is time, is there?
No time for questions. So if you do have questions for Jeannie, go ahead and find her later on in the conference. We're going to go ahead and set up the next one. And just a reminder, the speakers have 10 minutes to speak, 2 minutes for questions, or if they run over, that's okay as well. If we do a question and answer session after this one, please wait for the microphone before speaking, because we will be recording all of these are being recorded and also streamed to the internet. So we want everyone to be able to hear you.
Check 1, 2. All right. Gonna have to use my hands later, so bear with me while I mic up. Okay. Thank you.
Just in case the check
All right, where's Windows Explorer? Oh, okay. All right, hi everybody. My name is Mark Percy. That's me on the left, if you couldn't tell. And with this project, I absolutely have to acknowledge my partner in crime, Kim Preshoff, is an environmental science teacher at our school. Also the author of some TED Ed talks. You may actually see her name online. But she is the idea person. I always say, I'm not very creative, but if you give me something that we need to get done, I can figure it out, how to make it happen. And she comes up with all the great ideas. So we had an idea. We've struggled, as we all do, with teaching about the seasons with the kids. And, just a quick review. We work on this misconception about distance from the sun not being the reason for seasons. And then when we do talk about the seasons, oftentimes we will use a space-based view showing the Earth orbiting around the sun with its tilted axis, its revolution, and then the term parallelism, of course, meaning the axis is always pointing in the same direction. But we felt that the students, they might be able to give us feedback and tell us, that Earth is in this position at this season, but a true deep understanding of why this causes seasons seemed to still be lacking based on their explanations and their answers on tests. So what we know is that the real factor why the tilt and the revolution and the parallelism causes us to have differences in seasons is because of the energy coming at the Earth. The length of time each day, the duration of that incoming energy, and energy. So a number of years ago, I developed is not a big deal at all, but in the planetarium, even back in the old optomechanical days, we would have experiences replicating this diagram where the kids are inside the dome looking at the different positions of sunrise, the noon altitude. And with the digital system, I found it was really easy to improve on that with these history trail lines. This is definitely not the most enthralling thing that we can do at the planetarium, but this is something that the teacher and over again, to have the kids inside that dome looking at the different lengths, the different positions. So it's a kind of a data-heavy lab, but the kids, that's very valuable to the teachers, and it really clearly addresses that first factor, the duration. You put these lines up in the dome, and it hits the kids right between the eyes. That winter line is much shorter than that summer line. But I had been using some discussion, some lines I developed about getting them to understand that the noon altitude was also affecting the intensity of the light on the ground. And again, understanding of that. So here's a dome capture from our home latitude. A little side note, what we do, a lot is that it's easy to change latitude and show the exaggeration or the attenuation of the difference in insolation. Starting at our home latitude of 43, it's a pretty obvious difference. You go down to the Tropic of Cancer, it's a more subtle difference in the length of the lines. Go to the Arctic Circle, it's 24 to 0. And then we take them to the North Pole and talk about how bizarre it is there because there's no day or night cycle at all. Of insolation. Now, here's a diagram I found online that we've probably all used some version of one way or another. Trying to get the kids to understand that it's intense. But just as often, you will see diagrams like this. And unfortunately, but this is where the big idea started to come together. These are some of my stage crew kids working on building the set. And rather than just get rid of these 8-foot by 4-foot half circles, we decided that we could make them, we could make them into the giant protractor, which I brought with me. I was very excited to be able to share this with you, but you got to give me just a second here to get set up. I don't think I need help. Just a moment. You talk amongst yourselves. So what the kids had to do to cut it out was not really difficult. It just was time consuming. They had to cut that big circular shape with the saber saw to make the set to begin with. That took forever. And then to turn it into the protractor, they had to cut the middle out. But eventually we wound up with 4 of these. I was extremely unhappy when I took it out to my truck and realized that it doesn't fit. So I had to modify this one here. The truck will take things that are 8 feet long, but it's 4 feet in the middle. And I tried every different orientation you can imagine. So anyways, get this thing set up here. All right. So we've got our big protractor, but in experimenting with different types of lights, I was really not happy at all with what we were getting in terms of an area of projected light, which is where this little guy came into play. If you know anything about theatrical lights, the ETC Source 4 is kind of the industry standard for good lighting, and I like to browse through the catalog. Hold on a second here. And just dream about what we could buy if we had lots more money. But I came across this little guy, which is meant for probably museum exhibits. And it's the Source 4 Mini. Now, it's not cheap. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was about $300. So we applied for a little mini grant to afford this. Got actually a set of 4 now. Ooh, tied up there. But I just have not seen something that's able to project a clear area of light as well as this. I'll shine it up on the screen so you can see. Because it's a theatrical light, it's got lenses and it's focusable. You can bring it down to a very specific area. The one drawback I found is that it has shutters, which are really handy when you're trying to control your light on the stage, but that ends up being a bit of a hassle for you. You have to keep telling the kids to pull those shutters back out over and over again. If anybody can come up with a cheaper solution, please let me know, but that was kind of the big breakthrough for us, was finding that light. All right, so here's the lab we came up with. What the kids do is they set up the light, they attach it to the protractor, and what they record at different angles, so you can see the angles painted on it there, at these 6 different angles, we had them record the area of the ellipse by taking a physical measurement with a meter stick. And then use this equation here to calculate the actual area of the ellipse. And they then graph that information, and it's one of these things where you can show them and talk to them till you're blue in the face, but when they have to actually take the measurements and then put it onto a piece of graph paper, it starts to really get through to the kids that weren't getting it before. The other thing we had them do was use an app on their phone that measured light intensity. Now, I'm going to admit to you there's a little bit of skew in the data because of the way the sensor on the phone works. Turns out it actually makes the change in the intensity more exaggerated. So not 100% scientifically accurate, but still, it gave them physical data. They got to play with their phone, what kid doesn't like that, and put together graphs like these, looking at the area versus the intensity. And I'm sorry, this is the top one, the area versus the angle, and the intensity versus the angle. And really, explanations like this were really pretty amazing. Now, what I do, I keep this around the planetarium, and I also use it in a demonstration mode where I will attach 2 different lights to it, and I've got a little switch box I built. Makes it really easy to switch back and forth between the 2. In the darkened room of the planetarium, they can just see it. They see that the light from the lower angle is dimmer than the light from the higher angle. And another thing we could do to extend it, we talk about the length of shadows for different creatures, different angles of incoming sunlight. So we get our little space monster and our astronauts there. So that's our big idea. And Kim and I decided maybe we could get rich off of this, but instead we decided to do the right thing and share it.
All right, wonderful. Does anybody have any questions?
These are high school students, right?
Yeah, these are high school students.
Thank you.
I thought I saw.
Did you try to measure temperature?
No, but that would be a good extension of this. You certainly could do that.
So the light you said was a couple hundred. Overall, ballpark materials cost?
That's really the only material we had to buy. I mean, we bought the sheet of plywood. Radius, but beyond that, it's all completely homemade. And that's why the light is really, that's the one thing. If somebody figures out another light source that can do a clearly defined area that they can measure edge to edge with a meter stick, let me know.
I actually have a question. Is that light source an incandescent or the LED?
It's incandescent, yeah. And I think that would be, especially if you're going to measure temperature, who was asking about that? Yeah, that would certainly be important because,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I do.
LEDs really have the full spectrum.
All right, any other questions? Oh.
I think it would be a good approximation, but that's what we looked at flashlights, floods, and none of them give a clearly defined edge. That's what it's all about. It's not even such a problem if there's a hot spot. Light, you just don't have that hard edge to it.
Yep, all right. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so that is it for this session. Lunch will be in the University Heritage Room at 12:15, so just in a couple of minutes if you want to head down there. Sponsored by Seiler Instruments.